All right, exciting stuff. Second missionary journey. Here's the map. It's the year 49. Did Paul is happy that the meeting went well? We're going to start it and take a break in just a few minutes, okay? Take a break in 10 minutes. So here it is, 49. First missionary journey started because of a sending off by the Holy Spirit, okay? Second missionary journey, there's nothing mentioned about the Holy Spirit. The Holy Spirit doesn't send Paul everywhere all the time, and the Holy Spirit does not tell him where to go everywhere all the time. It's mostly left up to him. And when you decide to go on the mission field, you do your homework, you study, you explore. Paul had to do that too. Remember his methodology, okay? So what is it that motivates him to go on what we call the second missionary journey? We're looking at it from, the fact that we know all about it. It's going to last double the amount of the first missionary from 49 to 52. And it's first motivated by the fact that Paul falls in love with people. Okay, why do I return to Catania? I hope to go back there in February because the church there is just such an encouragement. I've given lectures there at the feet of the Etna volcano. It's an amazing place, great congregation. Why do I go back? Compared to Florence, where I, studied, Catania is not as beautiful, okay? It's the people. The people. There are monuments, there's art, there's architecture, there's touristy stuff, and then there's the people. Paul goes back because of people. He falls in love with people. He's concerned about young churches. They're struggling, and he takes it personally. He will say in one of his letters later on, of all the things I've suffered, beatings, stonings, shipwrecks, the letter 2 Corinthians 11, okay? He says the biggest burden I've had all my life is the concern for the churches. And churches are people, names, faces. Why does he start on the second mission journey? He goes to Barnabas and he says, let's go back. Go back where? To the places they had left a year earlier, in the year 48. There would be Lystra, Iconium, Antioch, Pisidia. Go back and see how they're doing, encourage them, teach them further. That's what drives him on the second missionary journey, okay? And if you look at the red, starting at Antioch of Syria here, okay? Please make note at Antioch of Syria that he doesn't go by sea. He goes around the bend to his hometown of Tarsus. Is that right? And then he goes through the Cilician gates. That's a narrow pass between the mountains right nearby there. It's a narrow pass. It's the only way you can cross there. That's, by the way, where one of the major battles of Alexander the Great had happened, Battle of Issus, right nearby there 3 centuries before. And then he goes through no man's land and hits again in succession Derbe, Lystra, Iconium, and Antioch. But of course, we're going to stop at Lystra because we're going to pick up one of the delightful mentored young men that are going to help him and follow him, travel with him, love him, and admire him and esteem him the rest of his life. So that's Acts chapter 15, beginning with verse 36. That's your text now to pick up. So let's just read that and call a quick break. After some days, Paul said to Barnabas, notice it's Paul that initiates missionary journey 2. I'm in verse 36 of Acts 15. Let us return and visit the brothers in every city that we proclaim the word of the Lord, see how they are. It's concerned for Christians. He doesn't have Zoom. He doesn't have email. He doesn't have, and so there are maybe sporadic people that are traveling from those areas coming through, okay? But that's as much news as he's going to get. He wants to go back. Barnabas wanted to take with him, and you know what happens here. He was so mad at John Mark a year and a half before when he deserted. That's the word that's used. That when Barnabas says, I want to take my cousin, Paul looks at him, and here I'm reading he says, what? Paul is still mad as a hornet's nest. And Barnabas must have said something to this effect. I have to read between the lines here. This young man needs to be encouraged. I understand your disappointment from a year and a half ago, but it's been a year and a half. We need to take him again. And Paul will say, I will not, man. Look at the words. there arose a sharp disagreement. So they separated from each other. Barnabas took Mark with him, sailed away to Cyprus, but Paul chose Silas and departed, having been commended by the brothers to the grace of the Lord. So they part. Here's what happened, in my opinion. This is not a theological disagreement. It's a methodological disagreement. And those happen with men and women of God today. You could be in favor of one program in church and another being in favor of another. Okay? I don't know if it's happened to you. Maybe your disagreement is sharp, but you don't hurt the church because of it. You just simply each do your thing, which is what happened here. Please remember, John Mark will be with Paul in Rome when he's about to die. When Paul writes the letters of First and 2 Timothy, John Mark's in Rome. Okay? So there will be a reapproachment, a growth on the part of John Mark. And that's great to know. But right now, Paul says, I'm not taking him again. And Barnabas feels strongly about evidently encouraging the young man. And they simply go. There's a splitting of the ways that's not theological, it's methodological. They give each other a blessing, no doubt. And the two men go back to the island of Cyprus, and Paul goes and chooses another very appropriate companion, and his name is Silas. Well, that's his Jewish name. His Greco-Roman name is Silvanus, because he's another rare Orthodox Jew from Jerusalem that has also Roman passport, like Paul. This is very unique, two of them. So he's a perfect companion. Not that they're going to pull that trump card out all the time and use their status as Roman citizens. They're gonna not use it as a way to get in, clout, VIP status. They're not going to do that. But it is, a fact that both Paul and Silas have Roman. They can say the magic words, civis Romanus sum. And I don't know how Silas does. Remember, his Latin name is Silvanus. And that's the way he's going to be addressed in other texts. Any comments or questions you have here? Second missionary journey, 49. Here we go. I do wonder sometimes how thick the scroll was of the book of Acts that Luke wrote. It was made out of an animal skin. And to us, it's 28 chapters. They had to be really heavy, okay? I guess I say that because look at the last verse of chapter 15 of Acts. Luke summarizes really quick several weeks of travel. And I think we're in the year, they're traveling by land now. So, it could be in the winter of 49, winter of 49, and beginning of 50 AD, as we call it. But he went through Syria and Cilicia, strengthening the churches. So, there go Derbe, Lystra, Antioch, Pisidia, and Iconium. But he does stop at Lystra to tell you, oh, by the way, chapter 16, verse 1, a disciple there, Lystra, named Timothy, the son of a Jewish woman who was a believer, but his father was a Greek. He was well spoken of by the brothers at Lystra and Iconium. Paul wanted Timothy to accompany him. And we have that amazing addition. So Paul and Silas is add on Timothy in about the early spring or winter of the year 50, early 50. And we have that, that question that Paul asks. Having just come, the summer before from a meeting in Jerusalem, Gentiles do not have to be circumcised. And then a few months later, he turns around to Timothy when he adds on, knowing that it comes from a mixed marriage, pagan to a Jewish woman. And by the customs and social customs and laws of the time, the mother gets to raise him in the faith in Jehovah, but he's not circumcised on the 8th day. So Timothy is not circumcised. Well, there's no evidence that Titus was either asked to or required to. Paul says to this effect. They won't let you go in, speak in a synagogue, unless you decide to do it. And the maturity and the incredible, suffering and pain, and they had anesthetics, but still, the potential for infections for an adult. Timothy agrees to do it. Timothy is asked by Paul. Paul vehemently defends the rights of pagans not to be circumcised, and then he turns around and asks, I don't see any contradictions. It's called expediency. It's called, would you give up a freedom to be heard in your preaching of the gospel? Would you give up a freedom that you have? You have a freedom not to do this. It's not required. But would you give it up if it made you more effective, as a evangelist, as a preacher? What will you do for it? So, any comments here? I'm impressed by Timothy's maturity at this point. He will be such a joy, a son in the faith. He will be called by Paul later on. He will, receive the last written letter of Paul before he dies, 2 Timothy. And in it, Paul will say, come quickly. That young man's going to be like a son in so many ways. Young man, how old is Paul? It's the year 49. Paul may be 40, 45. Timothy may be 20, 25, something like that. That's our best guess. All right. So there we go. Any comments or questions here? Okay. Paul revisits the churches. Timothy joins the team. He submits to circumcisions so he can be effective. And then there's what's narrated in verse 6, starting at 6 of 16. Any comments or questions here? Be sure to just let me know. They went through the region of Phrygia and Galatia, having been forbidden by the Holy Spirit to speak the word in Asia. And when they had come up to Mysia, they attempted to go through into Bithynia, but the Spirit of Jesus did not allow them. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce you to what's at the bottom of this slide. In the travels, Paul's not told where to go, but sporadically, twice in this trip, he's told where not to go. So this does happen, okay? Paul proposes to go to a certain place. Where's he going to go now? Well, I can tell you, in this region where he's at, after he's gone back to Derbe, Lystra, Iconium, and Antioch of Pisidia, where he's going, only place he can go to now in a big urban centers. Well, Ephesus. Now, it's a good several hundred miles away, okay? But that's got to be attractive to Paul, the biggest metropolis in the whole region of Asia Minor. That's got to be it. So here you are. Look at the map, please. So find Antioch of Pisidia. That's where we're at. And then you will find the red line. Does it go towards, look at Ephesus over there on the coast. Do you see it? But I think that's where Paul wanted to go. But he gets a vision. So please make note. Can't go west. Can't go north. Look at where Bithynia is. You see Bithynia, north. The Spirit of Jesus, one instance, the Holy Spirit, another one. Okay? So we are given details about who in a vision tells Paul, not that way, not that way. In this particular missionary journey, twice God says, not that way, not that way. So where does Paul end up? If you can't go west, you can't go north, you go northwest. So see, follow the red line of the map makers, and you'll find yourself in the city of Troas, which, yes, is the same city as ancient Troy. Does that ring a bell? Trojan War, 13th century before, Homer, Iliad, Achilles, Agamemnon, 10 years, epic conflict in the 13th century before Christ between two major powers on the sea. And one of the two was going to be obliterated. And it just so happens that the Greeks won thanks to a stratagem called the Trojan horse. Have you ever heard of that? It's, in my opinion, all real. Now, there are made up gods, but here you go. So, Troy. So, Paul ends up in Troy. And I have no evidence that Paul loves to sail by sea. I have no evidence that Paul intends to go to Greece. He's in Troy. I'll be funny for a minute. You know how funny I get. He's sitting in a Starbucks in Troy. I'm going, now where am I going to go now? And God sends instructions by way of what we call the Macedonian call, right? Sends a Macedonian man who appears to him and says, get on a boat and come to the Greeks. Okay, so I'm reading chapter 16, verse 6. They went through the region of Phrygia, having been forbidden by the Holy Spirit to speak the word in Asia. When they had come to Mysia, they attempted to go to Bithynia, but the Spirit of Jesus did not allow them. Verse 8. So, passing by Mysia, they went down to Troas. By the way, down is actually up. But remember that instructions in the biblical text are not talking about up or down or up in a map that we're looking at. They're talking about when you're walking it, when you're on a donkey, is it down or up? That's how these first century terms are used. A vision appeared to Paul, verse 9, in the night. A man of Macedonia was standing there urging him and saying, come over to Macedonia and help us. When Paul had seen the vision, immediately we sought to go up into Macedonia, concluding that God had called us to preach the gospel to them. Now, I'm going to assume that all of y'all know this text well and these moments well. Stop me if you don't. Let me give you some pictures. This is the plains of Troy. This is where the epic battle happened 13th century before. Troas was a small-sized city at the time of the Roman Empire, but it had been the site of a major empire, powerhouse, the Trojans, upon the Aegean Sea. And you will find that the Turks today in Troy have rebuilt a model of the famous Trojan horse, the way by which the 10-year war was finally brought to an end through a stratagem whereby the religious superstitions of the Trojans were preyed upon by the smart Greeks who left behind, as they feigned an exit, a retreat from the beach, hid behind an island, and they left behind a gift of a Trojan horse, inside of which there were about 30 warriors, including the guy that came up with the stratagem. His name was Ulysses or Odysseus. And the overjoyed Trojans, after 10 years, instead of burning this gift left on the beach by the Greeks, pulled it into the city walls, wanting to make sure they didn't offend some god or goddess. And of course, during the night, the 30 warriors came out, and so did the ships of the Greeks from behind the island. And that's the end of the Trojan War, and Troy will be truly destroyed. It was destroyed. There are 7 levels in the archaeological digs of Troy today. The ancient Troy is a little different from where the city of the first century Troy is, but it's in the same locality, so to speak. These are remnants found by an archaeologist named Schliemann in the 19th century. This is the ramparts of the city of Troy that was destroyed by the Greeks. These are the views out to the sea. That's the sea that Paul's staring at when he gets the Macedonian call. Remnants of the ancient city today, where Paul was joking about Starbucks. They didn't have that. And I reckon they didn't have coffee either back then, but these are remnants of part of the structures of the ancient Troy, looking out to the sea, or Troas, as it was called back then, 2 different ways. That's a reconstruction of a temple in Troy to the god Apollo, Smintheum, and the archaeologists have rebuilt a corner of it to kind of show you. Now, Acts chapter 16 and verse 10, the last verse we read. Paul's going to get on a ship with his companions, which at this point are Silas and Timothy. But a 4th one's going to be added on. It's the narrator of the book of Acts. You may know this, so I'm just reminding you. 3 times in the book of Acts, Luke, the doctor, who is narrating the story many years later, he's writing probably in the year 62, okay? And he looks back on those days and recounts the moment when he joined Paul and joined his party in the city of Troas. And there's the first of 3 we sections in the book of Acts. Very quietly, without making a fanfare of it, Luke adds up onto a trip and he shifts from the third person plural, they, to we, which means he was with the party. But he doesn't make a big deal of it at all. It's remarkable. Luke is a great storyteller. And he goes from third person singular plural, he did this, he did that, they did this, they did that. He goes to we, first person plural pronoun. Acts 16 verse 10 is when he joins the party. Now here's a question I can't answer. What's Luke doing in Troas? I don't know. Who converted Luke? I don't know. Was Luke a doctor? We do know that from one of Paul's letters. I would have known it, by the way, from the book of Acts. The way he describes certain things, he's an educated man that has a medical training, clearly. Okay. But was he a Jew or a Gentile? Question. My ex-dean of the Bible department disagrees with me. He thinks Luke was a Jew. I have a problem with that. It's not important. My problem is I'm not sure where a Jew would have done his medical studies in the landscape of the first century AD. There were many medical schools at the time. Greeks are the ones that started medical schools in Chios, Samos, and many other places. And I'm not sure where it doesn't matter, but I think he's an ex-Gentile, Luke is. I don't know how long he's been a brother in Christ. I don't know how long he's been converted. I just know that whether this is the first time he's met Paul or not, he loves Paul. He's going to tell the story of the development of the church from 47 to 57, the most amazing decade in the expansion of the church. He's going to tell it through the travels of Paul. And he participated in some of those. And what's interesting is that all three we sections where Luke joins the trips of Paul, parts of them, small parts of them, longer parts of them, all three of them involve a sea journey. I don't know why, it's just a coincidence, but there's a small sea journey here. So here is the port that they will sail into. Let me give you a map. Here's the map again. Oh, there it is. Okay, look at the map now. Please make note. I'm looking up there up north, way up top of your map at Troas. Now look at the red line. It's going to take you across the Aegean Sea. Normally it depends on the weather, how long that would take. In this particular account, it seems like only took about a day and a half, because Paul mentions they stopped at the island right across there. You see where the word Thessalonica is? Underneath the letter O of Thessalonica, there's an island. They made it all the way to that island on the first day. And then the second day, they went on in to the port city of Neapolis. And that means it was good sailing weather, okay? Must have been a good time of year to sail across. That's a pretty long distance. But anyway, they sail, all four of them, Luke, Timothy, Silas, and Paul, in the spring of the year 50. They sail, and this is Paul's first ever in his life to Greece. Now, how exciting must this be? He has been studying Greek philosophers, speaks Greek fluently, is a great Greek writer, but he's never been to Greece. And it's got to be exciting. But Paul's not a tourist. He doesn't do things for tourism's sake, okay? So we have to remember that very much, okay? So here's the port that they sail into. It's called Neapolis today, the biblical Neapolis. The word Neapolis, by the way, is simply a Greek word that means new city. When they founded a city and couldn't think of a name, they simply named it Neapolis, or it's called, in your language, Naples. There's a bunch of Naples. There's Naples, Florida, Naples, Italy. There's more than one Naples. There's a bunch of Naples along the coast of what we call France today, the Greek colonies. When they couldn't think of a name or establish cities, there are several Neapolis. Neapolis in Greek means new city. So there it is. This one's in Macedonia. Small potatoes. Paul doesn't evangelize there. He goes 5 miles in. Look at the image you got before you. You see a winding road that goes across the hill. This goes from Neapolis, where they got off. By the way, if you go to Neapolis today, I recommend some great fish in that little port. And there's a column on the beach that says this is where Paul landed. I don't. Nice try. But men have well-meaning Christians tried to locate, where did the children of Israel cross the Persian Gulf? You'll find a column there too. Don't believe it. We know the city that they landed in. It's called Neapolis. Let's stop with that. Okay. But they took the Egnatian Road. Look at it. This is a Roman road built a century and a half before by Roman legions that goes 536 miles, and it crosses across the hill here, the Egnatian Way. It's named after a Roman general that commanded the forces that built it, Ignatius. And it had been built in like 136 before Christ. So it's about 180 years old by the time Paul gets there in the spring of the year 50. And this is his first contact with Greece. Okay, so here we are in Philippi. Which one of y'all, or all of y'all, did the prison epistles with me? Philippians. Mark did. And Miss Sandy didn't, and Marco didn't. Okay. So I'm going to walk them through, Mark, just a few images, okay, of archaeological, because it's worth the visit. It's a long way from Montgomery, Alabama, or Philadelphia. But that said, it's a lovely visit, the archaeology that's left there. We're in Macedonia. That name has rung in history for the last 3 centuries because Philip II, King of Macedon, established a very powerful presence in the scene of history back in the 350s before Christ. And then his son, Alexander the Great, made it even bigger as he united the Spartans and the Athenians and the Corinthians, and then started an 11-year campaign against the Persians that goes down into history as one of the most amazing. Today, if you visit the region of Macedonia, you can visit the incredible tomb of Philip II, father of Alexander the Great, that's in place in situ under a hill. It's an incredible museum in the space where they found it. Three great events. When Paul gets there in spring of 50, here are 3 great events that are making this city kind of important. Philip II had discovered gold mines, and that's how that city was originally built. With a newfound wealth, he had renamed the city after himself, Philippi, after Philip II. And that's point number 1 in the importance of Philippi in history. Secondly, there had been a major battle closer to the birth time of Paul. It happened about the year 40, 41, 42, a major battle between Roman legions and Roman legions. In 44, there had been an assassination of Julius Caesar, and there had been major Roman generals, Roman authorities, Mark Antony and Octavian, that had gotten certain legions of Rome to back them against Brutus and Cassius, that were 2 of the conspirators. And there had been a major battle right outside of Philippi. And by the way, Brutus and Cassius eventually lost, even though they were about to win. Octavian and Mark Antony will win the day. And then Octavian and Mark Antony will be at odds with each other over who will be the first emperor of Rome. Octavian will win out. But here's the point. About 50 years before Paul was born, a major Roman battle happened here. And as a result, the Greeks in the city of Philippi had been basically told to vacate. And even the Jews that had been there. And that became a major Roman, all the veterans of the battle, the ones that had fought for Octavian, were given new houses, new lands, rewarded with their loyalty to him. And Philippi became a Roman city in northern Greece, which is definitely going to be a surprise for Paul, because he, for the first time, is in Greece, and he's going to experience something very different, okay? By the way, in this history, the third thing that makes Philippi important is the arrival of Paul and companions in the year 50, because 4 men come into a city of about 30,000. They will make all the difference, all the difference. let me, if you mind, Mark, I apologize. Just take them through some images because I'd love for you to see sometime if you have a chance. You'll have to go up there. So let me share a different thing. I'm pulling it up. Here it is right here. So I'm going to take you there now. This is the view of the landscape of the city that Paul walks into. You're looking at the Acropolis of Philippi, right there in northern Greece. There's the modern day city of Philippi down on the left-hand side, okay? This is the river Gangitis or Krenides, as it was called. Lydia, remember her? We're about to meet her. Paul's about to meet her in the spring of the year 50, okay? It's not a big, you don't want to fish here. You can barely, wash your hands in it, but it's the river outside of Philippi, okay? This is the place where the first convert in Europe, it's not called Europe back then. It's, one of the provinces of the Romans. It's called Macedonia, but it's a little river outside of Philippi where Paul's going to meet and convert his first. And there's a Greek Orthodox gentleman that has been kind to me over the years of visiting there. And he has loans the land right by the river, and he has built sidewalks and easy places where Christians like you and me and others can go sit down, read Acts 16, and remember the establishment of the church in this area of the world. Here's a Greek Orthodox church that he paid for with his own money. And these are ruins of the ancient Philippi that Paul and companions will walk into. When he walks in, Paul must have said, why are there Latin inscriptions everywhere? This is not Greek. This is Latin. There are about 113 of them, okay? And Paul must have asked what's going on. And maybe some theologians think that Luke was actually from Philippi. He was actually going home. Don't know why he was in Troas, but he was going home. So please make note, the we section only lasts that trip because Luke will not leave Philippi. He stays in Philippi. And the next time we encounter him 5 years from now, it's going to be in Philippi. And that's why most theologians think he lived here, he's from here. That may be the case, I'm not sure, but he definitely gets off the trip. He just goes from Troas to Philippi in Paul's life, but he will be very dear and he will cross paths with Paul several times later in his life, okay? But here's an inscription. Here's the Acropolis again. Let me take you to some ruins. That's the ruins of the marketplace, the agora. That's the word in Greek for the central heart of the city. Yes, that's from the 1st century AD. Of course, earthquakes have disheveled it, and modern day Greeks have moved over and built houses off of that, but archaeologists have uncovered it. Please look in the middle. Above the agora is one of 3 major Christian basilicas from the 4th and 5th century that will be built here. So here's the point. What can 4 men do in a city of 30,000 pagans? Well, check back 3.5 centuries later. What do you find? Paganism is gone, bankrupt. Christianity was legalized in 313, made the state religion in 386. And when you check 3.5 centuries later, Christians have built major basilicas, early Christian church buildings that are huge in a city where there are only 4 in the spring of the year 50. So you're looking at the excavations of the agora. You're looking at the forum. That's the Latin word for the marketplace, agora. This is a Roman city, more or less, in a Greek landscape, okay? And I already told you why that's the case. Here are some of the forum again. It had covered spaces, protection from rain, sunshine. It had water drainages. It had workout centers, had pagan temples to the gods, Greco-Roman gods, and also to some of the Eastern gods like Mithra and Isis, some of the mystery cults. Those were present in this city, fairly wealthy city. And all the names are in Latin. That must have thrown Paul off. He was in Greece for the first time. He was looking for Greek, and he found Latin everywhere. turned to Luke and said, okay, what's going on here? Okay, I've waited all my life to come to Greece, and what's going on? Some of the drainages of the water. I'm just walking through some images. Mark has seen these, but the other two have not. Bema is a word for the speaker's corner or judgment seat. It's where court cases take place, and if there's a Roman governor nearby that holds court cases, or it's where you can get up and speak of anything but politics. Okay, within Roman society, anything but politics. Okay, and this is the major Roman road that Paul comes in on, coming from the port of Neapolis. It's called the Ignatian Road, spelled with the E or with an I. It's the same thing. And here are the big stones of a Roman. Here they are. Okay, the Ignatian Road. Now, Paul, in my opinion, is his plan right now is to stay on this road, which travels for another 300 miles towards the coast of the Adriatic Sea, on any major city that's going to be along. He's going to stay on the highway. Okay. However, he's not going to be able to. He's going to stay on it for 70 miles until he gets to Thessalonica. He's going to stay on it for another 20 miles to get to Berea. But then plots against his life make him have to run. But this is the road that he walked on during his time. It's the spring of the year 50. Here are the shops. See these little walls, dividers, various shops along the forum that are there, remnant from the time of Paul. More inscriptions in Latin. This one was over city town hall of Philippi. It says on it, if you can read it, on the second line, lower line, this was way above on top of a big building, by the way. Provincia Macedon. Do you see province of Macedon? Can you see that? That was on the city hall of Philippi back then, okay? So it's under the Roman provincial administration here. Rome owns all of this. They conquered northern Greece in the 130s before Christ. So they've been around in this area for at least 180 years. I'm just walking you through other images of the excavations of the city of Philippi. This one's interesting. A child's game, scratched in stone. Public restrooms in Roman society, they were available. They running water in your homes. Rome had brought so many progress to civilization, entertainment, and slaves would be there to help you out. There was running water to wash your hands off right in the front here. There was running water where the human feces went, and no privacy whatsoever. But yes, they did have women's and men's stalls that were different. Slaves took care of providing their version of toilet paper, okay, which was not as soft as Charmin and stuff like that. Here's a palestra, which is a workout center. So I'm sure they had Peloton and, aerobics and stuff like that. Okay. This is not the prison cell of Paul and Barnabas. It was by all accounts, a water cistern. But Christians later on, 3.5 centuries later, will try to identify anything connected with Paul. And in their good intentions, they think this was the prison cell of Paul and Silas, who spent one night, right? And then there was an earthquake. Do you remember that? Acts chapter 16. That's where we're at. So we're going to quickly review that. Did Paul ever catch theatrical events in Philippi? I don't know. Seats about 8,000 people, which tells us that the population of Philippi was about 30,000 at the time, okay? So here are all images from the ruins of Philippi, okay? Paul will use in his letters words like hypocrite, like he'll use from the theatrical world several times. I think that's all I want to do there, okay? Come back to the text. Let's see if I can stop that share and come back to share. Let me look at my time here. Let me keep you for about 15 more minutes and take a break a little more. Let's go back to where we were. Life of Paul. Okay. Here we are, sharing back to where I was. Whoop. Yeah, here we go. Okay. So it was a Roman colony governed by Roman law. This is important. Exempted from taxes. They got to govern themselves because colony. We know exactly the name for the political leaders of this colony. In Greek, they're called strategos, which is exactly the word that Luke will use as he describes the events here in Acts 16. Luke, as a narrator, is accurate in every detail, historically, linguistically. So if he's not inspired, I'd like to know how on earth he did it. See, he's both informed. He's writing the story from a first-person view. He was there. This may be his hometown, but there you go. It was a military center, had veterans from the Roman army. There were families there from 3-4 generations before that were descendants of those veterans that fought in that war. And there was a very important Roman road that went right through Philippi downtown and kept going towards the east and the west. It went to the Black Sea, all the way to the Black Sea, and it went to the Adriatic Sea, 536 miles, all built around 130s before Christ by Roman legionnaires. Okay, so the gospel was brought to Philippi by Paul and his 3 companions in the spring of the year AD 50. These are all terms, things that I've covered. By the way, when you look at the letter of Philippians, there are umpteen indications of the Roman citizenship of the members of the church in Philippi. I'm not going to detail them now because that really belongs to the study of the letter of Philippians, but there are umpteen evidences in the letter of Philippians that they were all Roman citizens, like he was. Okay? I told you about Neapolis. I told you about the Ignatian Way. Here's an important thing. It's the only city in the recorded travels of Paul and missionary journeys where there is not a synagogue or synagogues in the city. Why? Because the Romans had kicked out a few decades before all the Greeks and all the Jews. There's no synagogue in the city of Philippi. That's why Paul has to go outside by a little river, because in the noise and hustle and din and confusion of the marketplace, of the agora, who can pray in that kind of land? He goes outside by a river outside to find someone that might be in prayer, that might be a believer in the one God of the Jews and Jehovah, and he will encounter Lydia there. No synagogue in Philippi, gotta go outside to find a quiet place where people looking for silence, for a spiritual retreat, so to speak, will be found. That's where he's going to encounter the first convert in Europe that we know of, okay, that he makes, Lydia of Thyatira. Now, I say that, first convert in Europe. The church in Rome has probably already existed since the day of Pentecost. So let me make sure I don't confuse you there. She's the first convert in Greece that we know of, in Macedonia. She is actually not Greek. Lydia is a single woman from Thyatira. Thyatira is a city in the central part of Asia Minor. Thyatira is one of the 7 churches of Asia Minor in the book of Revelation. Thyatira is not close to Philippi. What's Lydia doing there? Is she divorced? Is she never married? Does she have children? Does she have slaves? She's got a business. She's a businesswoman. Her business is purple cloth. All clothing in the first century was either khaki or something like that, unless you could afford material that had been dyed, and one of the favorite colors was purple. It came from either the root of madder plants or from fish of the sea that use it as a device to ward off any predator. She probably got it from madder plants, but I don't know. How big was her company? I don't know. Can I suggest that she moved from because it was a colony and there were no taxes. I'll ask her when I get there. Why did you move? I don't know. But she is a God-fearer, the term that is used there. Just like for Cornelius, God-fearer. Okay? She is somebody that believes in the one God of the Jews. Okay? And she is converted, and she and her household, the word in Greek is oikos, household, could be her slaves, could be people in her business, could be children. If she's a widow, I'm not sure, but it's her people. They convert because not because she makes them, but because she is respected, no doubt, and she presents the gospel to her household. And that's the first nucleus of the Philippian church, okay? You already know who's the second nucleus of Philippian church. Beginning with chapter 16 and verse 16, okay? As we were going to the place of prayer, we were met by a slave girl who had a spirit of divination and brought her owners much gain by fortune telling. She followed Paul and us, crying out, "These men are servants of the Most High God, who proclaim to you the way of salvation." And this she kept doing for many days. Paul, having become greatly annoyed, turned and said to the spirit, "I command you in the name of Jesus Christ to come out of her." And it came out of her that very hour. You know this narrative. Here's my take. Hope that you agree. She truly does have the ability to prophesy. How? By a spirit, a demon. There's demon possession. And there are business leaders in Philippi that make money from her ability to do so. But like in the case of Jesus, when he comes upon demons, sparks fly when somebody that has the charismatic gifts of God, Paul, and a demon, sparks fly. Now, I have no idea why Paul put up with her telling the truth for 3 days. He was annoyed. Jesus didn't want, and Paul doesn't seem to want, the testimony of a demon. But demons are not atheists, and demons, when they come across the presence of God, they are like compelled somehow to say so. And after 3 days of putting up with it, Paul expels the demons. He has that ability. I don't know why he waited. You'll tell me when I get there. I don't have any explanation. But there is then what happens in the aftermath of the loss of abilities to prophesy of this young girl, because the business owners are hacked and they turn him in to the Roman authorities of the city of Philippi. And thus, Paul and Silas are arrested. We don't know anything about Luke and Timothy. But Paul and Silas are arrested and they are beaten. The Roman rights are violated. Question: did they try to say, you can't do that, we're Roman citizens? Did they allow it to happen? Did Paul whisper to Barnabas? I'm just suggesting, okay? To Silas, excuse me. Let's not use our Roman citizenship. Silas might have uttered back, but we're going to take a beating. Paul would have then said what? I don't know why this happened. Let me suggest that I think it might have happened that Paul saw advantage in taking a beating so he could gain clout because they are violating his rights and those of Silas. I'm not sure of this, but we can read it. Look at verse 19 of chapter 16. When the owners saw that their hope of gain was gone, they seized Paul and Silas, dragged them into the marketplace before the rulers. So we're in that marketplace that you were at a minute ago. I showed you the rooms, the agora. They're in a public setting. That's where trials took place. The bema, judgment seat, is right there off the agora. And when they had brought them to the magistrates, they said, so we have public magistrates. That's the word in Greek, strategoi, by the way, that Luke uses. These men are Jews. They are disturbing our city. They advocate customs that are not lawful for us Romans to accept. See how they claim their Romanity? These are Jews. So, somebody should have waved their hands and said, you might ask them if they have citizenship. But the assumption is, no, there are so few. The assumption is, no way. Besides, they're troublemakers. Okay, that's what somebody said, and the mob believed. So there you go. The crowd joined in attacking them. The magistrates tore the garments off them, illegal, and ordered them that they be beaten with rods. Rods are the customary way in which the Romans give a beating. Rods. They give you bruises and break some bones, maybe, but they don't break flesh. The Romans will also, as you know, practice a flagellum, which is what Jesus got in the instance that we see of, but that was in Palestine. This is in northern Greece in a Roman colony. So when they had inflicted many blows upon them, they threw them into prison, ordering the jailer to keep them safely. And having received this order, put them in the inner prison, fasten their feet in stocks. How many Roman rights have been violated? The doors were torn off. They were beaten with rods. They were put in stocks. They were put in prison without a trial. Multiple. So here's the point. The strategoi, the city leaders, they're in big trouble. When it's found out that they have violated Roman rights, they're going to lose their jobs. They're going to be put in prison. They're going to be, because Roman rights are very serious. Only about 5% of the world have it. They assume, or Paul and Silas never said it. I don't know why. I'm going to suggest that Paul may have, in this case, whispered to Silas and said, let's take a beating, because I think we can achieve some advantage in this city. So there you go. Well, you know the rest of the story. Singing of hymns that night. What'd they sing? What'd they sing? They sang, from the Jewish songbook, Psalms, right? What else did they sing? Were there hymns? There's Psalms, and then there are what Paul in his letters of Ephesians, Colossians would call hymns, songs, and spiritual, right? So there were different kinds. They have them by memory. They had no PowerPoints or songbooks. They sang for hours, beaten, bloodied, hurting, in stocks, and they sang. And who was listening? Who was listening were the jailer. I wish I knew his name. Who was listening were the other prisoners in the prison cell. And this was unusual. This was strange. And it wasn't the beautiful voices of Paul and Silas that hit them. What do you think it was? The words. The words. What made the jailer think? He listened too. He listened all night. He'd never had prisoners like this. He wasn't talking about the Mormon Tabernacle Choir. He was talking about two voices that in the situation they were in were singing praises to God. And this makes all the difference. And by the way, the lyrics of our hymns, they matter. They teach theology. How does the jailer know what to ask? How should I be saved? What should I do? How did the jailer know? He listened to the lyrics of the hymns. That's why I'm very particular about the lyrics of our hymns. I don't care if they're new or old, high church or devotionals. They must have theological meaning that when heard by others are not just hymns for us. They are to encourage us. They're also hymns for somebody who walks in, somebody that's listening to you, that's sat down, that's the first time they've been at church or whatever, wherever, that teach. Our lyrics of our hymns must teach like they do here. And there you go. The evidence of Acts chapter 16. Okay. What else? You remember the rest of the narrative, right? Earthquake. By the way, the earthquake is used by God. It only has certain effects, right? It doesn't kill anybody. It doesn't collapse on anybody. The chains come off. The stocks are loosened. The doors come off of the jail. I've been in earthquakes in Greece. My campus outside of Athens was 3 stories high. And by the way, in Athens, Greece, they don't allow you to build until recently more than 8 stories because of frequent earthquakes in Greece. So I've experienced those. So the damage done to the prison cell in Philippi, northern Greece, is that, they don't hurt anybody. And then there's a second thing that's remarkable. None of the prisoners run. The jailer in the darkness is about to pull his sword out, dig a hole in the ground, and fall on his sword, because that's better than being put in front of a firing squad. He's sure that the earthquake has released prisoners they have run. Paul is the one who saves his life by saying, don't do that. Don't commit suicide. The Romans thought of suicide as a better way to go than being put in front of a firing squad. All jailers knew if they lost their charge, they would be put in front of a firing squad. We don't care what the excuse is, earthquake or whatever, okay? No excuses. He is prevented from killing himself by Paul, who says nobody's run. And then at 2 or 3 in the morning, he takes Paul and Barnabas to his home, washes their wounds off. And we have the conversion of the second nucleus of the Philippian church, which is, of course, the jailers. I wish I knew his name's a house, okay? Remarkable events in the year, spring of the year 50 in Philippi, northern Greece. Wow, what an experience. A few more days. You know the rest of it. Look at picking up verse 36 of Acts 16, and then we'll take a break here. This is fabulous. What happens in the aftermath? This is why I suggested you Paul may have intentionally taken a beating, and he talked Silas into it. When it was the day, the magistrates sent the police saying, let him go. The mob was over. The business people had gone, so they're going to let them go. This is what happens. The jailer reported these words to Paul. He was excited, saying, the magistrates have sent to let you go. Come out now. Peace. And then the jailer is absolutely mystified and surprised by the reaction of Paul. Paul says, I don't think so. I don't think so. Paul said to them, they have beaten us publicly. Uncondemned men who are Roman citizens have thrown us into prison. Do they now throw us out secretly? No. Let them come themselves to us. This has got to be an amazing moment. The jailer goes, what? You're Roman citizens? Why didn't you say that? What? So he sheepishly goes to the magistrates, the strategoi, and says, did you know you violated the rights of Roman citizens? And the strategoi of Philippi know that they're going to lose their jobs, be beaten, be put in prison. So they come and they do this version of, could you pretty please with sugar on top quietly just leave and not turn us in? Could you please? And Paul says, no, I think we'll leave when we want to. And by the way, we'll come back when we want to. Oh, one more thing. You will not touch the young converts in Philippi. Is that clear? I think all of the above happened, but it's not in the text. So you'll forgive me if I kind of read between the lines. Why did they take a beating? Paul will take a beating, about to be beaten. In another instance, he'll yell, is it legal for you to beat a Roman citizen? So sometimes he will not take a beating. Here it seems like he did. So there's my 2 cents about the events in Acts chapter 16. Okay.